beautiful people out there. How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season, off season. It doesn't matter because it's football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this NFL trade deadline recap of the 2023 NFL season. Before we dive into the show, I'd like to ask, if you have not done so already, to please like, subscribe, and share the video if you have not done so already. And if you know anybody that enjoys this kind of content, helps boost the channel, get us out to the algorithm, get us out to more eyeballs. If you have not done so and you'd like to, that would be greatly appreciated to me. Also, if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. Helps support this channel in a financial way and helps put food in my belly. That would be greatly appreciated if you would like to do so. The link to that would be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. So this week's show, as I kind of alluded to, is going to be a little different than what it has been in previous weeks and what it's going to be for the rest of the season. Game-wise, there was a couple games I wanted to talk about. The plan originally for this was to talk about some of the games from this past weekend and talk about what happened at the trade deadline, because I figured there wasn't going to be a lot, because usually trade deadline, we hype it up every year, but there usually isn't a whole lot that goes on. This year was a little different. It was kind of like that last year where there was just a bunch of things going on the deadline. Ended up being the same story here. In fact, there is a lot that happened within the past 24 hours that we need to talk about. So, no game recaps this week, but don't worry, there will be more game recaps going in for the remainder of the season. But we need to talk about what happened from yesterday, on Tuesday, on Halloween. Holy shit, there was a lot that happened. So, trade deadline, as I alluded to, usually not a whole lot that goes on. Couple trades here and there, but boy howdy, there's some things to talk about. I brought up three of the big ones. The three big ones that we need to talk about. There were about 6 total that happened yesterday. I want to talk about the big three. 2 of them involving one team in particular. We're going to talk about the first one, the big storyline from yesterday, and that is Chase Young, a player who is a former second overall pick out of Ohio State, drafted to Washington, and had a dominant rookie year in 2020, and he looked like he was going to be the superstar we all anticipated him to be. And ever since that rookie year, it kind of hasn't turned into that. He's been fine. He's been good when he's been out there, but he's dealt with a lot of injuries, and when he's out there, he hasn't really developed his game in a whole lot of ways, hasn't really expanded his pass rush moveset really much of at all since his rookie year. Missed the first couple games this year. But when he came back this year in 2023 for the Commanders, all of a sudden, he looked like he worked on some stuff. He looked like he actually developed some more pass rush moves outside of just being a better athlete and being stronger than everybody, which is something that worked for him in his rookie year. It worked for him at Ohio State, and it didn't work for him these last couple of years. Well, this year, I think he figured it out, and he's starting to work on stuff, and now it looks like his upside is has a chance of being reached, potentially. The question was, if he does reach that potential, was it going to be as a Washington Commander? And, there were some circulations around what his status would be at the deadline. Not as much, most people anticipated what it would be like coming into free agency because, the Commanders, I don't think, picked up his 5th-year option, and no, they didn't. And this was the last year of his rookie deal, so he was going to hit the open market. So it was a matter of, is he going to stay in Washington, or is he going to leave either at the deadline or via free agency? Well, yesterday we got our answer. The Washington Commanders, there we go, sent Chase Young in exchange for a 2024 third-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers. Let's talk about this from Washington's perspective. Washington, I understand it, but you could have gotten a lot more for Chase Young. Yes, he hasn't turned into the game wrecker that we thought he could be after his rookie year. That is true. But you could have gotten a whole hell of a lot more than a third for him. With his ability, with his upside, with his athletic and physical tools, you could have gotten a lot more than a 2024 third. So that's kind of that from Washington, but I understand why they moved on from him. But also, did it have to be to the Niners? Like, it's a thing, like, we kind of had this conversation last week with the Eagles trading for Kevin Byard. It's like, and I put this out on Twitter, by the way, and if you have not followed me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod, or X, sorry. But we kind of talked about this where it's like, why are we giving teams that are already loaded to the brim with talent and giving them even more talent basically for free? Because, let's be honest, a 2023 or 2024 third round pick for a guy of Chase Young's caliber, it's fucking pennies. It's nothing. Like, it's nothing. So, basically, hold on. I will pull this up in a second. So, after this trade, this is the state of the 49ers defensive line right now. So, the 49er defensive line now comprises of Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson, Randy Gregory, and Javon Kinlaw. So, Kinlaw is definitely, he's a former first-round bust, so nothing really to say there. But for the rest of these guys, outside of maybe Drake Jackson, this is a fucking horrifying rotation. And the 49ers, I understand why they would want to go after it. Shit, I mean, you already have a strength on your team. Why not add to it? And, the 49ers, they're in a tough spot right now. They looked like one of the elites of the league through the first 5 games, and now they're staring in the face of a 3-game losing streak, and the offense not looking as good, and the defense not holding its own, especially this past weekend against Cincinnati, where Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who, by the way, are all the way back, they seemingly did whatever the hell they wanted to them. And it was the first time in a long time where the 49er defense did not look like the elite shit wreckers that we know them to be. And I think they realized that too, and they were like, you know what, let's just call in the reinforcements. And their reinforcement in that regard is Chase Young. So, and like I said, I kind of mentioned on this, if Chase Young hits, as in reaches the upside that we think he can after what he showed in his rookie year, if he can get back to that level and exceed that, which in San Francisco, there's no reason why he can't. Now, all of a sudden, because this is the last year of his rookie deal, it's a matter of, are they going to be able to re-sign him, or is it a 1-year rental? But that's a conversation for later down the road. For right now, you're looking to go for the rest of the year with Nick Bosa and Chase Young on both edges, Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead in the middle, and Randy fucking Gregory as a rotational piece? Like, oh my fuck. It's, if they don't lead the league in sacks from this point forward, or if they don't get to, at bare minimum, the NFC Championship game this year, actually, no, forget bare minimum the NFC title game. If they make it bare minimum to the Super Bowl this year, if they don't make it to that point, this season's a failure. This season's a failure because they're now too talented. They are now way too talented to not make it to that point. So, but yeah, I mentioned the 1-year rental thing, and it's a matter of, will they be able to afford him after the year if he does go on a complete tear alongside Nick Bosa? And that I don't know. We saw this, look inside the NFC West itself a couple of years ago with the Rams. They traded for Von Miller at the deadline, and it was basically just a 1-year rental to help them go and win the Super Bowl, which they went on to win. So they rented him for the latter half of that year, won a Super Bowl, and then let him walk in free agency. The 49ers probably saw that, and they're trying to do the same thing with Chase Young, who is not as established, not even close to as established as Von Miller. I mean, Von Miller is a future Hall of Famer, but Chase Young has the physical tools. He has the physical tools to be a monster, especially here in San Francisco. So it's really interesting to see how this is going to play out for the rest of the year. I still don't like the idea of just gifting these powerhouses more talent when they already have enough. But, hey, it is what it is. But staying with the Washington Commanders for a second, because this was not the only trade they made yesterday. In fact, this was not even the only pass rusher they traded yesterday. The one they traded before this was Montez Sweat, who he himself was going into a contract year, and he was set to hit the open market. So, hey, credit to Washington in the regards of, you can't pay both of them. You're probably not going to be able to retain both of them, most likely. So, try and get some capital out of it. And they did. They ended up trading both Young and Sweat. But, man, the situations could not have been more different. Like I said, you trade Chase Young to the 49ers, who are a Super Bowl contending team. And then they trade Montez Sweat to the Chicago Bears, one of the worst teams in the NFL, who just got embarrassed again on Sunday Night Football and don't seem to have any direction as of right now. And it's very unclear what their direction is as a franchise and an organization. That's where Montez Sweat is heading. And I kind of feel bad for Montez, but in that regard. But as far as Washington goes, hey, get some draft capital out of it. I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe it was a second rounder. Yeah, it was a 2024 second rounder in exchange for Sweat. So that's a really good return for him. They actually got a better return for Sweat than Young, which, I mean, if you watch the Commanders over the last couple of years, it's not hard to understand why. Sweat has absolutely been the better pass rusher out of the two and definitely the more consistent one of the two. But, that's a really good return for Washington for a guy that you knew you probably weren't going to be able to retain come free agency. So, hey, got an extra second-round pick and from the Chicago Bears, so it's going to be right at the top of the second round. So, and I always said, the first, 3 to 5 picks of the second round are basically borderline first-round picks. So, you traded Montez Sweat for a borderline first. So, hey, that's a pretty good trade for Washington in that regard. Now, as far as Chicago, I've seen both ends of this. Chicago is in a spot where they are not set to compete at all. They are in a clear rebuilding stage. They still haven't figured out the quarterback situation yet because everyone's penciling in Caleb Williams for them come draft season. But yet they still don't really know fully what they have in Justin Fields because the first few weeks was a disaster, but then he showed a little itty bitty improvement in the last couple weeks before he got hurt. But so they kind of want to wait to see what it looks like when he comes back and how he's going to look the rest of the year and, all that stuff. But as far as this trade goes, I've seen both sides of it where it's, you're clearly in a rebuilding stage. Why are you buying at the deadline? But I also understand the point of trying to get some guys that can be elite players for you to build around in the future. So, let's talk about the former, and that is, you're not ready to compete right now. So why are you giving up good draft capital for a guy that is about to hit the open market and you don't even know is going to even want to re-sign? Because Montez Sweat, he's probably not happy. He's going from a Commanders team that has the potential to compete in a wide open NFC to now he's going to one of the bottom feeders of the league. So he's probably not too happy about that. And he's probably looking around and seeing how things are run. And he's probably not the most ecstatic about what he sees. And he's probably thinking, hey, I'm just going to play it out this year and then I'm out of here. So maybe it's a situation where the Commanders, or not the Commanders, where the Bears can convince him to stay. You know, are they going to try and sell him on, hey, man, I know things are in the shitter right now, but we are in a good position where we can build something for the future. So, you know, it's a weird one because it all banks on whether they're able to retain Montez Sweat. And if they don't, and Montez Sweat leaves in free agency anyway, then this was a terrible trade on the part of the Bears because you just gave up a second-round pick that was going to be a valuable second-round pick for basically a one-year rental. So it's very, very risky in that regard. But if they throw enough money in his face and he takes it and they sign him long-term after this year, then all of a sudden, this could be a really good move for them just like that. Because now you have an awesome piece for a pass rush unit that is one of the worst, if not the worst in the NFL. I mean, shit, they went into this year with their best pass rusher being Yannick Ngakoue, who even back in his days in Jacksonville was just an above-average pass rusher at best and has been worse, has gotten worse and worse and worse every year since he's left Jacksonville. So that was the state of the Bears' pass rush and their D-line this year. So getting a guy like Montez Sweat who could come in and is their immediate alpha on the D-line is a huge get. And if they're able to sign him long-term, either during the season or at the end of the year, that is a massive, massive piece for this team moving forward and building around, because that is a great player to build the rest of the defense around for the future. Yeah, it's a trade that I can understand why some people are hesitant to it, but it's also a trade where I could see the upside for it for the future, because at the end of the day, the Bears are looking for the future, are looking into the future. So I can understand both sides of it, and it is really like on the narrowest of lines of it can fall either way, and it could determine this team's future for a while. So that's my thought on that. And then one last trade to talk about, and that is there was a quarterback movement, and we were talking about before the trade deadline is, you know, speculations on are there going to be quarterbacks that are going to be moved potentially at the deadline. Was Kirk Cousins going to be moved? Was Ryan Tannehill a guy that was going to be on the move somewhere? And there was a trade involving a quarterback yesterday, and it was one quarterback in Arizona by the name of Joshua Dobbs. Joshua Dobbs was traded yesterday to the Minnesota Vikings in exchange for a basically it was a pick swap, a 6th and 7th round pick next year between the Cardinals and the Vikings. Vikings making this move after the devastating news that Kirk Cousins blew out his Achilles on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers, and his season is now done. And it sucks for Minnesota because, you know, Kirk is in the last year of his deal, and he just seems like such a great guy. We harp on Kirk, the quarterback, all the time of, is he the guy to lead a team? Is he a true franchise quarterback? We talk about all that stuff, but he's still a good enough quarterback to come into a good situation, a good team, and help them win football games. And seeing him suffer that after it's seemingly like they turned it around, after starting off really, really slow this year, they worked their way back to 500, and Now, just like that, their season's up in the air because Kirk Cousins is now out for the year. So, and the only other option the Vikings really had at the moment that was on their roster was Jaron Hall, who's a rookie out of BYU, who is a completely raw prospect, and they have no idea what they have in him. So the Vikings were a team that you thought were going to make some moves, make some calls to try and get somebody. And they found that guy in Joshua Dobbs, who, I saw this on Twitter where people were saying that, man, Joshua Dobbs, he's basically speed running Ryan Fitzpatrick's career by jumping through all these different teams. And, he was a guy who was a part of the Cleveland Browns in the preseason. Then he got cut. And then he got brought into Arizona a week before their opening game and was brought in to be their starter on 1 week's notice. And, say what you will, he played valiantly. He played as well as you expect Josh Dobbs to play. And, he looked like this was his opportunity. He was going to make the most out of it. These last few weeks, though, he has not looked good, especially this Sunday against the Ravens. He did not look good at all. And it resulted in the Cardinals saying, hey, we're kind of done with the Josh Dobbs thing. It's either going to be Kyler Murray, who they activated off of IR, or Clayton Tune, the rookie out of Houston, that they're starting next week. So it's like, at first I was like, damn, they're just benching Josh Dobbs altogether. No, they're just sending him elsewhere. And they are sending him to the Minnesota Vikings, but he's not going to be a starter. I did see he's not going to be the starter next week for the Vikings. It is going to be Jaron Hall. So if something happens with Jaron Hall and he doesn't play good, at least they have a backup that has experience this year to come in and play as well as he could. I mean, my God, it's not the first time that it's not even the first time this year where he had to learn the playbook and potentially start on short notice. So, that's the sort of thing with the Vikings. And it sucks because, like I said, it seemed like they had turned their season around and they were going to get some momentum and maybe compete for a wild card spot. Like, they were right in the thick of it. They are right in the thick of it now. And 1 foot caught in the turf is now just, I don't want to say their season's over, but it just got a whole lot harder for them. And for the Cardinals, like, hey, this is a team that wasn't meant to compete this year anyway. And like I said, Josh Dobbs played valiantly, but, Kyler's set to come back soon, and it's a matter of we just got to see what else we have. But, yeah, I'm excited for Josh Dobbs. It's a fresh start. It's a new start on a new team that has much better talent than Arizona. That's to say the least. So, that's pretty much it in that regard. And, usually, like I said, I was going to talk about some of these trades and then talk about some of the games afterwards. But then everything got thrown for a loop because last night at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time, I got a notification on Twitter from one Adam Schefter saying, sources say the Las Vegas Raiders have fired head coach Josh McDaniels. What a fucking bomb to get dropped on you at 1 in the goddamn morning. So, we need to talk about this because this is the big story coming into today. Not really much of the trade deadline stuff, though there was some big stories from that, but this is now the main talking point for today. Josh McDaniels is now a 2-time fired head coach. He's a 2-time failed head coach. Who would have thought that on in the middle of the night, in the middle of the morning, on November 1st, 2023, Raiders fans across Vegas and whatever Raiders fans still exist in Oakland would be chanting across the streets, "Ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead." Because that's what it feels like. It feels like the Wicked Witch is finally dead for the Raiders. And I can't say it's shocking. I'm not going to sit here and say it's shocking at all, because we all kind of expected this when the Raiders made this hire. You know, like, this is a guy in Josh McDaniels that has had success really only in one place, and that was with the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. And you can even make that argument that the only reason his offenses were that successful was because of the quarterback running those offenses and Tom Brady. Because, it wasn't successful when he did it with Cam Newton. It was more successful with Mac Jones, but not as successful in the latter half of that year. But yeah, even then, even despite all that, this is a guy that back in, 2009? Yes, 2009, was hired as the head coach for the Denver Broncos. This was a year removed after, 2 years removed from the 2007 Patriots season, where they just lit it up offensively and they were the greatest offense the league had ever seen by that point. And 1 year removed from the 2008 season, where they missed Brady for the year, started Matt Castle, and the offense was still really functional, and they still finished that year 11-5. So understandable that Josh McDaniels at that point in time was the hottest head coaching commodity out there back in 2009. And the Broncos were able to snatch him. And he damn near completely destroyed that organization. They traded away Kyle. He traded away Kyle Orton. They bombed draft picks. He was the guy that, advocated for the infamous first-round draft pick of one Tim Tebow. Like, Josh McDaniels desperately wanted Tim Tebow as a first-round pick for whatever weird-ass reason, even though everyone, even at the time, despite Tebow's resume at Florida, despite his resume as a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and a national championship winning quarterback, nobody at the time viewed Tim Tebow as even close to a first-round pick, except for Josh McDaniels. And in 2010, for the few games he was still there, basically used him as a borderline running back. And, it's not hard to see why. Tim Tebow couldn't throw a fucking football to save his life. But, it was just a complete dumpster fire. He had seemingly set the Broncos back years with his moves. And the offense, this incredible, complicated offense that had so much success in New England, all of a sudden he comes to Denver, and where he has guys like Brandon Marshall there that he could have used as his Randy Moss, and can't find a lick of success all of a sudden. So Broncos fans desperately wanted him out, and they celebrated too when they fired him. Also mid-season. Fast forward to the modern day. 12 years later, within the same division, Mark Davis, doing typical dumbass Mark Davis shit, decides, I'm going to give Josh McDaniels another shot. Despite the fact that he had been such a disaster in Denver, despite the fact that he was almost hired as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts a couple years prior, and he just was about to get on the plane and said, you know what, fuck this, I'm going back to Tom. He decides, you know what, I'm going to give Josh McDaniels the keys to my Corvette, the keys to my big-ass nightclub, and say, do whatever you want, despite the fact that the year prior, they had seemingly found their guy a head coach the year prior. Because the whole thing happened with John Gruden, with the emails and the racism and all that stuff involving John Gruden. They fired him. They make Rich Bisaccia, their special teams coordinator, the interim head coach. And he did a phenomenal job with that team. With all the stuff that team had gone through that year with, Gruden and Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnett and all that shit that team went through. The fact that Rich Bisaccia was able to turn that team around and get them to a wild card playoff spot is remarkable. And everybody, myself included, was saying, that's it. Make him the full-time head coach, because the players loved him. He was he was a hard ass, but not too much of a hard ass where players just didn't like him. He was a hard ass that held guys accountable, and the players loved that about him. He seemed tailor-made to be a head coach. And the fact that Mark Davis didn't even keep him on the staff, like, not making him the full-time head coach was one thing. They didn't even keep him around on the staff. Just goes to show the incompetence of Mark Davis. And then who he chose to replace Rich Bisaccia as the head coach and Josh McDaniels is just, it's fucking horrible. And then hearing all the reports over the past year and a half about how when they hired McDaniels, he basically came in and changed the culture entirely of what it was before. And you heard reports of people within the Raiders organization saying, yeah, it's different here now. It's definitely different, but not saying it in a good way, or it's like it's different but it's needed. They said it in it's different but it's different. And in a way where it's just sort of like hesitant and not really fully committal to the change, and it's that was a sign of like, all right, this isn't going to work out. But there was still hope, because you still had Derek Carr there, who had been there for a long ass time. You have an uber talented running back in Josh Jacobs. They just acquired Davante Adams, who wanted to be a Raider. He had turned down a huge contract with the Green Bay Packers to stay there with Aaron Rodgers, and he said, no, I want to be a Raider. Like, this team going into last year was a team that we thought could compete and potentially even win the AFC West and beat out the Kansas City Chiefs. There was real talks around that team. And then they just completely shit the bed. They completely shit the bed. And then going into this year, it was just more of the same. The offense couldn't do a goddamn thing. Davante Adams getting open constantly, and they're just not getting him the football. Hunter Renfrow, put him on a fucking milk carton. Where the fuck is Hunter Renfrow? Like, he was supposed to be the Welker. He was supposed to be the Edelman. You thought Josh McDaniels would look at a guy like Hunter Renfrow and be foaming at the mouth at what he could do from the slot with him. And instead, he's just been a complete non-factor. Darren Waller was supposed to be this team's Gronk, and he didn't do anything. To the point where they ended up trading him. And then they piss off Derek Carr, who, yes, was not playing well last year. But how much of that was him and how much of that was the system, we don't really fully know. So they get rid of Derek Carr, bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. That was just... He was like at the same level as Derek Carr, if not worse. And this year he's proven to be worse, because on Monday night against the Detroit Lions, he looked like shit. Yes, he was coming back from an injury, but he looked like shit. And even before he got injured, he was playing like shit even then. So that was a complete bust of a signing. And then they went into the Bears game with this nice young backup quarterback that they drafted in the 4th round that they traded up to the draft, and Aiden O'Connell, who, yes, they started him earlier in the year, and he did not play well. But it's a rookie 4th round pick playing his first NFL game, it's not really an expectation to play all that well. But they then went into the Bears game, and yes, you don't have Jimmy G, but you really felt like your best option to play was Brian Hoyer? And I don't know what it is with these former Belichick guys and their weird-ass fascination with Brian Hoyer, but my God, that dude cannot play quarterback in the NFL. He's not a starter. We knew this, he wasn't a starter from the moment he was drafted, that he was not a starting caliber quarterback. So I don't know what it is with McDaniels and Belichick's weird-ass fascination with Brian Hoyer. But point aside, they chose to start him over Aiden O'Connell. And then they come out on Monday night, play Jimmy G because he was back, plays like shit, and then they don't put O'Connell back in the game at all. So everything's just a complete shit show. And it's so much of a shit show that, keep in mind, this is a team that has their two best skill position players are Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs. Davante Adams, one of the best receivers we've seen in the past decade, and Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing last year. And this offense, with those two guys as the main headliners, have scored over 20 points in a game one time this year. One time. A team with Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow when they allow him out of the doghouse for whatever fucking reason he's in there for, can only score 20 points in a game one time. How the fuck is that even possible? So, it left Mark Davis no other choice but to walk in to his big-ass office in Las Vegas in the middle of the fucking night to timidly call up Josh McDaniels and tell him, sorry, but this isn't going to work out. We're going to have to let you go. And it wasn't just McDaniels either. They also fired the GM, Dave Ziegler. Just a few hours later, they fired the offense coordinator, Mick Lombardi, who was also a guy that McDaniels brought over from New England. And it's just a complete fire sale from the coaching staff. And we as fans were just left here looking at you saying, I told you so. We all knew it. We all knew from the moment he was hired that this was not going to work out. We knew it. It's like, there was a giant ass sign over his fucking head that said, do not hire me, I will fuck over your organization. And that is exactly what happened. And now you cannot sit there after he fucks over your organization and say, I didn't think this was going to happen. Really? So, yeah, this was... And again, there's really nobody else to blame for this but Mark Davis. You know, he was the one that made this hire. He was the one that chose not to bring back Rich Bisaccia as the full-time head coach, even though everyone knew they should have, because why wouldn't they after the job he did? He was the reason to let Josh McDaniels have as much power as he had. He was the one that allowed Josh McDaniels to completely change the culture there in that building and on that team. This all falls on Mark Davis. And he has nobody else to blame for this but himself. And now it's, where does Josh McDaniels go? Does he go crawling back to New England? Honestly, I hope not. Because, honestly, I'm at the point with the Patriots where it's like they need to have a complete factory reset on everything. And they don't need to be bringing in old faces and old Belichick guys again. And I know we went through this rodeo before where, you know, he got fired by the Broncos and then he came crawling back to New England and then was the offense coordinator there again and continued to have another decade of success. I know that. But Still, though, it's, man, it's, again, it's an I told you so moment. It's an I told you so moment. We all knew it was going to happen. We all knew it would. So, but, yeah, man, that's basically it. That's everything that can be said has been said. There's really nothing to say about a situation that we all knew was going to fucking happen. And actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he got fired from the Raiders like a few days longer than his original tenure with the Broncos, which is kind of fucking funny, actually. But, man, Josh McDaniels fucked over two different franchises, both in the same division. And once again, it goes into my theory that Belichick puts out his disciples, allows them to get head coaching jobs, fuck over those organizations in the long term, and then comes back to New England and once again have success. But even then, like, you look at New England now and it's like they're not having a whole lot of success. So, but still though, the theory is funny. But yeah, that's basically it. But hey, good news for the Raiders is that last time Josh McDaniels got fired, within 3 years, they were a Super Bowl caliber team. Just putting that out there. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to put a wrap on the video today. Like I said, if you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you have not done so already. Also, if you'd like to go support me on Patreon, the link to that would be in the description down below. With that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.